So now, without further ado, I'd like to bring up David William Gibbons and Jeane Manning, as I mentioned, author and steward of breakthrough technologies for many years. When she was asked to participate with David, it was interesting because we were just talking about her love of energy technologies and spending time with inventors for a long time, a magnetic attraction, you could say. Those of you who are here at the very beginning know that David opened up after music on Friday, and it was a very powerful dialogue he had with Brian O'Leary, and so this will be yet another iteration of his wisdom and intelligence along with Jeane Manning. So stay tuned, and I'll talk with you all soon.
The program that we have set up for the whole weekend, Jeane Manning is one of the motors behind that. She was my consultant. So I want to give her a big compliment in advising me on certain speakers. So, and this is one of the pioneer ladies in the field. And there are not many, believe me. It's all men. And Jeane is one of the ladies who is here in this field already for 20, 30 years. So give her a hand.
Thank you. Shall I talk about this? Thank you, and I want to mention that Joel Garvin and I have a book, Breakthrough Power, which was updated in 2011, and does give a lot of this history of the inventors, also bringing it up to date with the wonderful descendants of these inventors.
Today we're going to take a journey with you in the history of free energy. And we're going to spend an hour and do our best to start at the beginning. I believe, from my point of view, my perspective, perhaps Atlantis and the energies that they had at those times. And we're going to travel backwards and forwards to modern day, going through the early 20th century, talking about Tesla and Walter Russell and their influences and their challenges. So we'll start from the beginning, and then I'll pass it to Jeane. In my deep dialogues and my research, I have been looking at Atlantis and realizing the huge energies that they had of the human heart, using crystals as a conduit for that energy. And this is something that over the eons of time we lost in some way. If you were here for the first presentation, I had talked about the divine feminine. That plays a very large role in this. And we have traveled through the ages, and for some reason, we have lost many of these very intimate, powerful human energies. And this is today where we're going to start to develop, bring those back into our lives, become the divine, infinite human beings that we have always been and we will always be in the future. So I'm going to ask Jeane your thoughts to earlier civilizations, where that plays into the context here in terms of what Tesla and Walter Russell achieved in later centuries.
Well, a lot of people are wondering if a lot of us aren't reincarnations of the Atlanteans or Lemurians who had a high civilization, and it was great for a while, then eventually, who knows what, greed and pride took over, and as the story goes, the high priests used this crystal power in ways that it wasn't supposed to be used, misused it, and so maybe we collectively have already learned lessons about trying to go for big macho effects when we should be focusing on as small as beautiful and safe, and just proceed with inventions that can better our communities rather than power over other nations. I hope that those lessons have been learned, if indeed those stories are true.
And we traveled through the ages, and later on you had the Dogon civilizations in Africa. This is where actually the word priestesses is very important, the energies that they had. Where did they go? We have to ask these questions in order to transform our world today and see how that disappeared and now bring them back to us. And much of this in my work is about human behavior. human behavior will define energies and the way that we can utilize them in the future as we segue out of the fossil fuels that we've been so used to for so many decades. And as we move into this new era of free energy, and perhaps Jeane will be able to define for us what free energy is, we will be using human behavior as the source of all things and the definition and the response to an answer in creating that free energy, because after all, it starts in the human heart. It starts in us as human beings. And the devices that many inventors I have come across, and we talk about the devices and seen several of them, it always dawns on me I'm so passionate about this, that in order for the devices which are conscious beings, they are part of nature as we are, will not be able to operate unless the user, unless the human being is aligned with nature and aligned with the universe. That's where we're going, and that's certainly my work, is to create this alignment through human behavior. But your thoughts on the true definition of over-unity energy?
Oh, well, a definition of free energy that one of the high-profile researchers, Peter Lindemann, uses is that free energy is any energy that's accessed from the natural world. So that would include the solar and wind, but in more innovative ways that don't use up all the resources. And it would exclude power from unnatural acts like breaking apart the atom. Atomic fission is not natural. Neither is the really macho hot fusion. So if we're accessing power from the background energy of the universe, how natural can you get?
And it is about nature, is it not? We have to look at nature in the way that we define these new devices, these new energies. We are nature, we're all nature, we're all inseparable from it. And I think that a lot of communications that I have and dialogues misinterpret that and seem to think that human beings are disconnected in some way from nature, and perhaps we have been, and that's the way that it's traveled. But now we're finding, as we return back to a society that is off the grid in many ways, that we are nature itself. We travel through the ages, and we have great difficulties, and I have talked about the feminine and masculine energy is very important in my life. And a great study of Walter Russell and Tesla. And perhaps it would be a good idea just to go to Walter Russell for a second and ask you, Jeane, for your thoughts on that. Walter Russell, I've been developing now for about a year with my great friend Alan Lee Adkins, the pioneer, one of the developers of the CD. We've been taking it chapter by chapter in our broadcasts. And Walter Russell, the universal one, he defines the ever-continuing, ever-creating universe. He defines it through the spirals. He defines it through his paintings. He's not only an artist, but he's also, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks, David. I would like to add something to this definition. Every energy is a free energy, because we are creators of the energy. We create energy, our consciousness. We create energy with our desires. So, the whole energy is actually in neutral state, waiting to be activated with our desires, to be inspired, feel the energy of the word inspiration, feel the energy of spiral. We inspire energy to take some form and to serve us. Every energy actually exists just to serve us human beings, because we are creators of the energies. We are the boss.
Let me ask Jeane to, thank you. Let me ask Jeane to respond to that. Thank you.
I'm afraid I had difficulty hearing it. Could you sum it up?
We're talking about consciousness in the human heart, in the human being, as part of this free energy field. Basic premise.
Yeah, well, first I must apologize. A little hard of hearing, you know, I'm past my best before date, so I have to speak really clearly out there for me. The consciousness aspect is all important. That's what initially brought me into the field, and for the advertisements of our book on our banner, we have that you can't have the energy revolution without the consciousness revolution. So I think let's turn it back to the history now, shall we?
But that was a wonderful question
Thank you.
at the right time to bring in Walter Russell. Walter Russell, The Universal One, probably one of the most amazing publications ever written. And we are halfway through this book, and it has certainly changed my life. Walter Russell talks about the twin vortices. He talks about illustrates it as two cones, and yet this man was an artist and a scientist. He traveled through a 39 days period, well charted in his book, and he found the secrets to the universe. Twin vortices is where we talk about inhalation, we talk about electricity. This is where you have decreased density, increased pressure. You then have the magnetism and the opposition, and he defines this throughout the Universal One. And there's also a comparative here between that electricity and the male, and the magnetism, the radiating, the diffusing of the female. And this is where I talk about the importance of the divine feminine. Walter Russell, an amazing man, and of course he was in the same arena and same time as Tesla. He made the amazing quotation to Tesla once that in order for people to really resonate with your work, you'll have to wait for 1,000 years before people can understand where you are traveling, Walter. Your thoughts, Jeane?
Walter Russell continues to be an inspiration, and more than just an inspiration, to the hands-on inventors and engineers that I know. They're working on these inventions. Some of them have taken this study course from the University of Science and Philosophy, and Walter Russell's concepts are something that we, the general public, can grasp when people talk about entropy as the only game in the universe, like everything's running down and there's no free lunch. But the universe, with its in-breathing and out-breathing, the cycles of creation and destruction, it's creating, and our technologies can also use those creative motions. Our technologies for energy right now are too much based on nature's destructive half the cycle, so we have noisy, friction-producing, heat-producing energy technologies based on exploding the atom or burning fuels, but there are other ways, and the heroes like Walter Russell and Victor Schauberger, John Worrell Keeley, whom a number of the earlier researchers in this field just kind of used as their Bible to see the concepts that can inspire them to build something completely different from the destruction-based energy technologies that we use today.
And then, of course, we move on to Nikola Tesla, this amazing man, and I'm hardly qualified. I've been working on a long-term series for months and months and haven't even touched the surface. My learned colleague down here is an amazing studier and researcher of this, and I'm going to look forward to immensely to working with you on this. But what a paradox Tesla was. This man, very much like Walter Russell, Walter Russell's work, The Universal One, I certainly would encourage you to read it. It has completely changed my life, and I believe as a historian and somebody who's grown up reading everything from Chaucer to Shakespeare to multiple resources of information from over the ages, that The Universal One is the answer if you really want to learn the sources of creation and how energy works. But there is a paradox. Tesla, this man, around the same time, he came onto the scene in the 1880s. This man who was a picture thinker, picture thinker. He could create equations. He could create synchronicities in his mind, ultimate and immediate solutions in his mind without writing everything down. And it's well charted that in laboratories, while scientists would be taking hours to figure out equations, Tesla could do it in 3 seconds by his picture thinking. And yet the paradox is that with Tesla, he was like Walter Russell, disregarded in many ways. There was quite a contrast between the two individuals, that's for sure, but they were still going and traveling in the same direction. But Nikola Tesla, this amazing man, he's always, for me in my work, having studied Elie Lawrence of Arabia, they have parallels, completely complex in their characters, very hard to understand, very solid, truth, authentic. And much of that with Tesla, of course, was his background and the country that he came from. But Tesla was way ahead of his time, and he, of course, created the AC current. And was essentially suppressed in many ways. And I don't like using that word, and I try so hard to walk away from this suppression, because actually I believe that it's the other way around now. I believe that we're going to start taking over from the fossil fuel industries this coming year, and I think that free energy is where it's going to be at as we travel through a transition. But Tesla, this amazing man, was still, in many ways, and I'll be interested to hear what Jeane thinks about this, much more experienced than I am. But Tesla was still an amazing man, and still there was an amazing paradox. This man who defined the 20th century, and yet in so many ways he was suppressed from seeing his dreams, stopping conflict, creating free energy. And of course, this was the dichotomy that was developed by J.P. Morgan and others. But it was also where I go back to the human behavior element. It's so important in free energy, our human behavior and how we align now and how we interact, the rhythmic interchange that Walter Russell talks about. But Tesla was a complex character.
Mm-hmm. He was a dedicated scientist to the extent that even though he'd invented the basis of today's electrical distribution and transmission systems and generators and motors, the AC system, he didn't stop there. He kept following the experiments and what the results told him to take a step further, which eventually took him into an entirely different realm, which, if it were allowed to have been brought out into the commercial world, would have made obsolete all those earlier AC-based inventions. And the bankers who had bought up all the copper mines, like J.P. Morgan, would have lost their shirts. And of course, that wasn't allowed to happen. But the direction that he was going in, to put it simplistically, he discovered a different quality of electricity is how some of the researchers have explained it to me. And I'm just kind of going lightly on the technical stuff, partly because my degree isn't in technology, and partly because there's so many people in the general public that just want to kind of get the gist of this, the spirit of it. The spirit of it is, he called it radiant energy, and some of the researchers today are calling it cold electricity. It seems to be a safer type of power and operates under different rules than the generally rough, comparatively coarse and rough alternating current we use today. And I have witnessed the experiments where researchers who really followed Tesla's recipes exactly, spent years in learning down to the point of just how to make the wax, every part of the, just exactly as Tesla did in the experience, and came up with these very, very different type of effects. And, I've seen the dipping a light bulb lit by that type of current down into a bowl of water, and different people in the room who had no connection to the inventor were allowed to to try it out themselves. Now, that's not something you want to try at home in your experiments, but it's just one of the many indications that I've seen that these researchers today who are really, really trying to drill down and understand what was Tesla really talking about. They just don't take some surface explanation of it, but they really study the patents for years and talk with everyone who ever had any information about this, and they are getting results that defy standard science. So this holds out hope for a better future in that way. And there's also, do you want to go into some of the other researchers that today's experimenters are looking back at, like
Of course.
they're finding insights in the Coral Castle in Florida. The Edward Leedscallens didn't leave much in the way of writing, but he did leave some clues. That's only a part of the puzzle for some of the leading researchers today, such as John Bedini in Idaho, who are still trying to carry forth this work that Tesla started and are having successes. We skipped someone in the way past who has been dismissed because he's pretty easy to ridicule as a perpetual motion inventor, and that's Bessler, Johann Bessler, wasn't it? Who back centuries ago, his device was running for weeks, maybe months, in a locked room in a castle, and was locked up by some prince, and there were all sorts of officials of that time who witnessed his tests. That was one of the early chicken and egg syndrome, where he wouldn't tell anyone his secrets until they paid him the amount of money that he expected for his discovery. They wouldn't pay him the amount of money he expected for his discovery until they were able to get in there and get inside the device and find out how it works. So that's where it ended when he passed on. And unfortunately, that sort of story has played out over and over again, where we today really have to figure out a different way to do things, where it's a win-win for the inventors and for the people who want the technology for the world, and maybe don't have the $1 million that some particular group today is demanding before you can see a demonstration. That old controlling worldview is of the old paradigm. And as we've talked so much here in this conference, and I'm so pleased to hear all the talk about open sourcing, sharing, and not going to grave with the secrets anymore.
That takes us to the present day, I guess. Before we talk about that, though, I'd just like to briefly chart the period from 1945 to now, because it was very much part of Walter Russell's work. He wrote the book Atomic Suicide. And I worked with Dr. Brian O'Leary a lot around this area. It's important to recognize the implications and how this world was transformed in the early part of the last century. 1945, the introduction of the nuclear bomb. The results were quite dramatic and very sad for humanity. And Oppenheimer and many others, of course, realized after the event that they really didn't realize what they were opening up. It was a can of worms. And it defined very much our world, and it's defining and our road today to a meltdown, Fukushima. This is the most dreadful event that we've seen. Fukushima follows Chernobyl. This is what I call death energy. Death energy as in the radiating, the diffusing, the exhaling, and this is what we're seeing in the world today. Nuclear power is death energy, and I try to explain as pragmatically as I can to people who ask about nuclear power. Well, there must be something very divine about it, or it must be very different in some way. It is not. It is simply another way of boiling water to create steam to turn turbines, and it is killing this world. And we have to stop nuclear power. We travel through the 20th century and nuclear power, many other technologies, many of them wonderful, and many of them that have assisted the human being, the human heart. If you look at there are different definitions to that. If you look at the Mayan civilization, when they talk about the Bacton and the ninth level of where we are today, there are theories that actually it finished last year. Some are saying this year. They talk about this being the time of intelligence or technology. And I was so confused for so long working with Dr. Carl Kalaman, who is a wonderful scholar in the Mayan calendar. Was he talking about technology in relationship to what we use, our cell phones, our computers? No, they're talking about the technology of our minds. And this is very important today, the technology of our minds, how we're going to create this free energy out of the space of our hearts, from our consciousness, as this gentleman talks about. This is extremely vital to understand, understanding how us as human beings have a direct result in the way that these machines or these units or these free energy devices are going to work. They work in tandem, they work together, they are inseparable. And we reach the present day, and I believe, Jeane, perhaps you'd like to comment on all those past years with Tesla and Walter Russell and all these amazing people, going back indeed centuries, how they influence where inventors are today, and perhaps some definition required for inventors. There are many conflicts. We have a transition here between a monetary system and something else. I'm not necessarily suggesting that we're going to leave a monetary system, but it's certainly going to change, becoming more of an energetic, divine purpose of service. So given that, where do you think and how do you think that these incredible people influenced and assisted us to be able to actually place this into practical ways, practical means today?
Well, the inventors today acknowledge that they're building on the shoulders of these past greats. And I also want to mention John Worrell Keely. It's controversial just because he was so buried by the official story, which focuses on somebody having found a big sphere underneath the floor of his laboratory and claimed that he was using compressed air for his experiments, which is not so, because the thin pipe from that sphere couldn't have possibly carried compressed air, and instead it was carrying some etheric form of energy, which is what he worked with. And he was chronologically ahead of Tesla's time. And some say that if Tesla was 100 years ahead of his time, John Worrell Keely was 200 years ahead of his time, because it was so exotic what he was working with. More information has come to light in recent years. There's Theo, I don't have Pejmans from the Netherlands, correct? Wrote a book, a biography of him, which really covers it well. But the point for the general public is that it was really an interesting approach using special vibrations. So you know, the power of sound, as we've heard about here, the ancients knew about the light and the sound as a way to tap into the background energy of the universe. And Keely's specialty was sound. There's a story that one of his inventions, his assistant couldn't get the thing to work, just following the same instructions, doing physically everything the same as Keely had done. It didn't work until Keely came up behind him and put his hand on the man's shoulder, and then it started working. So it's real, I guess you'd say, woo-woo stuff, but some of today's more advanced technologies to do with some of the principles, resonance, etc., do kind of back up the fact that these things could have worked. I think it would be lovely to have, as another story goes, a energy device system for your house that the way you set it in motion is you just play a note on the violin. So that was early exotic. And we're coming up to today's inventors. You want to know how they've been influenced. And I would recommend not all of the energy of the vacuum DVDs, because a lot of them are so technical, but maybe for an introductory look at what some of today's researchers are doing to follow in Tesla's footsteps, and also some of the side trips taken in that DVD series, Energy from the Vacuum. There's one, I think it's called Cold Heat from Canada. And because I wasn't prepared for this morning, I don't have the name of the inventor on the top of my mind, but it's another one of another story, a very real and well-researched and documented story of an invention that it could have changed the world for the better. We wouldn't have had to have these oil wars and so on, but at the time, it wasn't allowed. Various shenanigans made sure that it wasn't. I choose to think that we're coming into a different time where we can't be stopped.
That brings us to present day. And what I've been so grateful for with this conference, it's been a wonderful experience, wonderful opportunity, is that we're all looking for solutions. We are solution-led. We've, for many years now, been debating this, felt suppressed, felt nervous about the establishment, understanding, well, how do we get the buy-in of the fossil fuel industries? How do we engage with them? And this is exactly what we do need to do now. This is my work, is crossing over the bridge. I talk to anybody either side of the fence and proud of it, because you start bringing audiences together. But what is it today that has to be achieved? We're talking about a transitional time, and all of us are involved, and all of us have an important part to play. We are, after all, as far as I'm concerned, the generation of generations. So what is the transition? Well, we are in the transition, and we're all driving our cars. And there's a paradox there. We have to get off of fossil fuels. My view is that we will be off of many of these fuels within 10 years, and what I would propose for thoughts is that in this period of transition, what is the catalyst that drives people away from the necessity for fossil fuels, for the utilities? Well, that's pretty simple, is it not, that they find their own sustainable communities. And there is much debate about this at the moment, and sustainable communities don't need to be new. They can be towns and cities in any country in the world. Because my belief is this, that 2013 will define the new transition, and it will define by just one community or one town in America or Europe that finds a way to take the electricity out of the river, to take the wind electricity, to take solar panels in a place like New Mexico. I'm so blessed. I've got all of those. I've got water, I've got reservoirs, and I've got wind that nearly knocks you down every day, and I've got sun 365 days. And these communities I can see next year are going to go sustainable, and I believe that that's going to be the way that we transform this world. And let's hope that it will be 2013. Meanwhile, some people will ask me, well, solar power, we've got wind power, and we have ocean power, well, we should use it. It's a transitory mode. It's a model that we can use. Why not? It will become a thing of the past, I'm sure, at some stage, but it's part of a transition. And with all that said, inventors today, perhaps if we invite the inventors into these communities to be a part of those communities, to actually practice it and see it and be proud of it, rather than residing in solitude in laboratories, could be the way to incentivize them.
And with solar and wind, the breakthroughs can be combined with those traditional technologies. So there are breakthrough solar technologies coming through PESWiki all the time. There are ways to create revolutionary, more efficient magnetic motor generators that can be combined with wind power. But there's really no reason for using such a huge amount of resources to build these mega-sized wind towers. That's not small is beautiful. So if we keep in mind working in harmony with nature, as Victor Schauberger, the Austrian forester, kept reminding us, you know, copy nature and comprehend nature, then we can have our communities and have a light footprint on the planet. This is what really made me decide to hang in with this field back in, well, the first conference I went to in 1986, but I'd met an inventor in 1981, but it was still a bit of a lark. You know, I thought about writing a book for the general public because it's such a fascinating field with lots of adventures and intrigue. But at the end of that Tesla conference in 1986, I met William Baumgartner and his wife, who gave me a copy of a book about Victor Schauberger. And then I realized, you could have technology. You know, my friends in the environmental movement wanted to look at it as technology's all bad because look what it's done to the planet. You could have conveniences. You could have comfortable life in that area of being warm and sufficient energy for all your electronics and everything, and still be in harmony with nature. In fact, the implosion-based technologies that Victor Schauberger demonstrated have the capability of cleaning up the substance that's used as a medium, whether it's water or air. That's quite the opposite of the fuel-based technologies that we have today that just totally trash the environment around them. So it's a very hopeful scene, and I hope that very stance of we're doing everything in harmony with nature will just be at the forefront of all our efforts. It sounds like it is from what I've heard here about the intention not to empower governments with something they'd use for the military. In fact, you know, we're not going to give you our technologies unless you can promise not to weaponize them. It sounds pretty idealistic and, yeah, dreamy, but, you know, I always get back to the power of the people. When we're united, we're the third superpower of the world, if you want to look at it that way. We're unstoppable. They really have to just get out of our way when we get united.
I suppose that brings us around in a full circle, because I started this with nature. Perhaps we could look at that transition again. Because when we talk about free energy, what are we talking about? Well, we're certainly talking about devices. For me, it's so much more. Free energy that I truly believe is going to enact and establish itself this coming year will have an effect on every part of life and every structure in our society. It will affect politics, every structure in society, and particularly the monetary system. And I think the monetary system is worthy of many debates in the future and much planning and much solution-led discussion. As soon as you have free energy, you completely redefine what money is all about, what energetic exchange is all about. The stupidity in my mind, and I'm sorry to put it that way, and it's the only thing in life that makes me shake, carbon taxes. Why don't we start looking at an energetic exchange that may be some sort of currency that is based around human beings being rewarded for, rather than cutting a tree down to have a swing, you know, keep the tree and don't go to Home Depot and forget all of that, but use nature. And I'm citing that in a naive way. But can we not do that? Can we not use nature to stop using consumables, stop using plastics? We'll answer your questions at the end, sir. Can we not do that now as we move into this next year? So this is all about free energy, which goes way beyond the device into the human being, the space of the heart, the monetary exchange, the dialogue, the deep dialogue, the Greek logos that I work towards, how I interact with you. If you criticize me, I don't turn around and say anything except for thank you. I will consider that, and I will come back to you, and I will praise you for that, because that's been a learning lesson for me. And I think these are, wonderful things to talk about. And it has been amazing, Jeane, with this conference that we've actually come out here, and I rarely see it, a conference that is actually looking at solutions and less now talking about the issues. And I wonder whether that's because of the timing. What amazing timing that we live in today. And how is it today that we can reward Tesla and Walter Russell and all these great people and actually make and create what they started to celebrate them? I think that's our greatest challenge, and I believe that we will achieve that this coming year. All of us together, inseparable, the universal one, taking in free energy and holding hands and doing this together. At the end of this historical, brief summary that we provided, any final thoughts from you, Jeane?
Yes, there are a lot of other heroes that we won't take time to mention, and in fact, your head might be spinning with all the names if we did try. Quite a bit of the history is in breakthrough power, along with current inventions, but I just want to emphasize that it is a hidden history. We weren't taught this in our school books, and it's still not in the textbooks. I remember when I was first learning about this, and I was just fascinated by Tesla, maybe fell in love with his picture, and I looked in Isaac Asimov's, I think it was Encyclopedia of Science, and there was just this little paragraph about the AC power systems, and then it talked about his feeding pigeons in the park. And I was just disgusted, but that's the way it's been. Textbooks have been controlled. It'll all change.
My last thought today is, as you probably know, I fell totally in love with Brian O'Leary. Brian O'Leary actually became a father that I had lost in 1997. We talked all day and every day for months and months. And I remember his last conversation. And it was 3 or 4 days before he passed. And he was going down to Quito to see the doctor. He had no idea what the issue was. And he had to drive. And he said, "I'm not sure, David, if I can get into that vehicle. I am actually in pain sitting in a motor vehicle that is pumping gas out of the exhaust." And I'll never forget it. And that was the last thing he said to me. And here we are 18 months later, and I was saying to a colleague the other day, I love driving. I've always loved driving. I will not deny that. I was brought up in a material world after spending my whole childhood running around the stones of Stonehenge. We all do it. We sink in a material world. We conform with the world. And I loved my motor cars and my motorcycles. And about a month or 2 months ago, a colleague of mine said, "Oh, I see that you're driving again. You're going from Los Angeles to New Mexico." And a month ago, I suddenly realized, and the impact was unbelievable, and I do believe that this is where we are moving, is that actually I'm getting to the stage, and I think I'm there where I cannot drive a motor vehicle. And I think that's saying something about where we are today. I literally can't drive a motor vehicle. And it's painful, but I think it shows how rich we are and how determined we are to move away from the fossil fuels, move into free energy, find out who we are. We can do this. This conference has created an incredible momentum. They have been held for so many years, and this very conference, I'm proud to be here, and I do believe that we have created something very special that places us in a wonderful position as we go into 2013, where we will find free energy and fossil fuels will fade. Thank you so much. There were some questions.
Wow. Everything's a learning. Everything's a learning. I want to addend something of what I heard here, and if we have a few more minutes, we'll take some questions too. I tell you, I personally think the more I look at it, and this is not because I happen to be in the field of psychology, although I think this is why I went into the field of psychology originally. The problem is one of consciousness. It's an issue of, I think, psychological and emotional maturity. That's our biggest obstacle. It's not a question of technology. We've got the technologies. We've had the technologies for a long time. As you both pointed out, we have these technologies from, if you accept the premise of Lemuria and Atlantis, and there's evidence of these, and from the work of Michael Tellinger and others, of civilizations as old as, if not older than those. I don't think the issue that we're facing, and I'd love to hear what you two have to say about this, is one of technology. I'm reminded of the story about the origin of the refrigerator. If you don't know it, it's before refrigeration, there was what was known as the Iceman and the ice business. And ice would be delivered by various companies and villages across Europe and the United States, and that was what people used to keep their food cold. And then someone was experimenting with Freon, and that led to the beginning of refrigeration. Well, this man got arrested. Why? Well, we know why. Because he was infiltrating that ice industry. And they put him, pardon the expression, on ice for a while. And, it took him a while to get out. But in fact, once an idea has come through, it will fulfill its completion. And that's how I feel about the free technologies that have been developed over the past long period of time at this point. It's a seed that's going and is ripening. So that's the good news on that side. But the part I was referring to initially is the issue of psychological maturation. And I think it's probably, even though it may not appear that way, the sexiest thing that we've got in terms of the whole idea underneath spiritual transformation ultimately is our ability to psychologically and emotionally mature, or as Carl Jung described, go further on the path of individuation, of becoming a true individual ourselves. And that is really what underneath that is the idea of not dividable, becoming inwardly one. And when we can move from a win-lose, a conquest mentality, this macho patriarchal idea that has been governing society for eons, and we move beyond that where I win and you lose, or any kind of permutation about that, we will have the breakthrough technologies governing our society the way we really deserve. So I wanted to bring that up. It's an inner evolution is what we're calling for here. David, do you want to comment on that?
I would concur with everything that you have said. We've been in this male-dominated society. We're now moving back to this feminine wisdom. We've been taught to oppose each other, fight each other at every goalpost, do whatever it is to defeat the other. The art of competition and the definition of competition has been so skewed, it is quite unbelievable. These are many issues as they try to recreate or reform or find where the Constitution lost itself in the United States. It needs to be rebalanced to come back to some sort of balance, and I praise them for that. And it's a tough job after hundreds of years of manipulation, but win-win.
Exactly.
Win-win. It's not about win-lose. It's not about competition. It is win-win for every single individual on the planet.
Exactly. And you know, what's interesting, one of my loves is neuroscience. And I've interviewed Lynn McTaggart, who has written most recently The Bond, who's also first well known for her work, her book called The Field. Are you aware of Lynn McTaggart? She's a wonderful American woman living now in London. And she's outlined the neuroscience that shows that the interpretation we have of Darwin is really very mistaken. It's not competition and survival of the fittest. It's survival of the most cooperative. We are truly hardwired for cooperation, and that's the way the human species continues on. It's not through smashing each other's heads, but there's a belief system inside our species, no, actually more like so-called developed society, that we have to win, one wins, one loses. And the fact is that we all have a hard wiring for cooperating with each other, for saying yes and agreeing with each other, and for belonging to something. That's where the energy of our psyche really develops. And what's not that is an aberration. So it's interesting to look at it that way. We've had it all the way, 180 degrees wrong in that regard. So I feel that that's actually very hopeful for us as a species. And a lot of my show actually is talking with people about these kinds of things to bring up the energy of cooperation and that spirit. And then I think once we work on that level, it's not like we like to think about the fossil fuel industry as the bad guys and we're the good guys. I think that's completely naive. I think what we're dealing with is an issue of lack of true psychological and emotional development. So we think that we have to have all the cookies ourselves, and that's just based on fear. And when we can evolve out of a fear-based, anxiety-based kind of state of being, then we have a chance to talk and really move things along in our society where everybody wins. So I've made that point. Does anyone have any questions or comments you'd like to make? We have a microphone.
Because we're talking about cooperation, I'm here because I met a man who sees in pictures like you're talking about. And as Mr. Allen knows and has said, sometimes these inventors, they're better at being alone and secluded and don't have the capacity to really do all it takes to put the invention onto the market. And as we're talking about cooperation, and Ms. Fitz yesterday was talking about building bridges between the funding and between the inventors so there can be a mechanism of determining whether they're indeed a good bet to invest in. I see your work as really important, Mr. Allen, and I'm here to ask, when we're talking about cooperation, if we couldn't find ways to support these inventors and have them on our shoulders as a whole group, this crowdfunding notion, and everybody may be giving €1 or $1, but as a whole group, enabling these people with all the infrastructure that's needed to bring that out so that we can all benefit from it.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
And
any number of different consortia could be developed along that line. Why don't you spearhead one?
Well, yes, and I also propose what's very important is the curriculums. And I propose also to rewrite this, and as another favorite scientist of mine, Nassim Haramein, says, it should be understandable to a 7-year-old. So I think this is the time. I completely agree, and I thank you all for what you do.
Absolutely. Thanks for your comments. Consider spearheading such a crowdfunding inventive group like that. I think it's fabulous, actually. Yes.
Just want to appreciate that comment. I'm amazed this week how there's such a singular vision. I'm here from California, representing the New Energy Movement and Sterling Allen's Nest Group. And that's the exact vision we have. We've been working real hard on those processes. We want the crowdfunding to provide an opportunity to have some incubation of these projects. We have Thorsten Ludwig and Mark Dancy, who are scientists that really believe that we need to put stronger standards in place to help bring this more towards the mainstream, so that the mainstream scientist who thinks that we're a little bit of a crackpot organization will see that we're using rigorous standards to vet these sciences and incubate them and prove that there's real technology here. So that crowdfunding type process we want to use to bring that vetting organization closer together and look at those standards. And so those are the types of things that exactly we want to do, and those are the visions we really want to see formalize and to have some more unity together, where all these scientists that are running around the world vetting these technologies can collaborate together, use those vigorous standards, and then share their papers and share their work and see which technologies we really want to get behind, and then provide more and more funding. And just as we said, I think Jeane mentioned it, we don't need to know exactly how the combustion engine works to believe it. So the scientists themselves are getting deep down into this technology, but the person that's giving that $1 just needs to see the bigger picture of, this is what I believe in, something of an alternative, and to be able to communicate to that layman so that it resonates, so that they will give that $1, so that we have millions and millions of people looking towards us as the organization that's doing the comprehensive work to really bring this out. And they just need a brief introduction to the different concepts we're talking about. They don't need to get deep into the technology, but that means we need some real savvy marketing people that can just resonate with the average person to bring this vision. And so we want to pull all these people together, the right marketing people, the scientists, so that we have a full comprehensive organization working globally to really bring this to the next level. So, that's why I'm here, and we love hearing these singular visions. Everyone seems to be coming to those same conclusions, and it's really great to see. So I just want to thank you for being here and to bringing that, because that's the same vision that we have back in the States.
Thanks very much.
Does Jeane
Do
have
you
a
want-
response?
Jeane, do you want to say something about that or no? Okay. Yeah, thank you for adding that. We've actually had a couple of meetings, and Todd and Joel Garbin and Sterling Allen are kind of spearheading a series of conversations that have taken place here at the Breakthrough Energy Conference about this. And I think that it's all on a very good footing. And I think that there's going to be a takeoff here, a breakthrough, as we say. I want to, just one moment, please. I was just told that, in fact, the breakthrough movement, will you get Sterling the microphone, please? Wherever it is. Breakthrough Energy Conference, Movement Conference, is going to be making something about this available. It's not ready yet. It's being put together. But if you consult their website soon, you will find some reference to this. So this kind of movement that you're talking about, Todd, so well, and you raised, is going to be cultivated over some time. Sterling?
Yeah, I just wanted to announce, is this on? Okay. I just wanted to announce that in the meeting 2 nights ago, we agreed unanimously on 5 points of emphasis for the global breakthrough energy movement, and we would welcome all of you to be involved in rolling this out. Number 1 would be education, like conferences like this, outreach, news, and things like that. Number 2 would be financing, funding, hitting all the different avenues, crowdfunding, donations, small investments, pulling all those avenues together to help the inventors and the groups like this. We want to have 10 people working full-time in the global breakthrough energy movement, and we need $5 million in the first 6 months to do that. Not that they're getting paid that much, but that's the goal, to raise that much for that initiative. Number 3 would be an incubator, not in this order, this is as it's coming back to me. Number 3 is incubator, the idea of wrapping people and talents around the inventor and the technology to take it from wherever it's at all the way to market. Another avenue would be vetting, to have a really solid core team of scientists with rigorous standards who would be able to validate that the technology does work and it is meritorious for us to get behind as a movement. So it's not just one person with their strengths and weaknesses making a determination, but it's a group of people who stand behind top 5 or top 10 listing that we can all really rally around. Another avenue would be an academic/research arm, so that you have basically the concept of the academic void that has been, the academic world has called this stuff crackpot science. And we want to be able to have an academic answer to them, that here are the reasons from an academic perspective. Here are the people on our academic board, here are their credentials, and they're standing behind this, and here's some scientific validation why this works, and some rules in the laws of physics that might need to be looked at anew, basically, bring some muscle to that. So that's what we agreed on. I just wanted to announce that. Thank you.
He was articulating some of the subjects that we've been talking about into way late, so we have been sleep deprived during this entire conference. But it's been worthwhile, and I appreciate you and Todd making that clear, where there really is a movement. Cecil, sure, make a short comment, and then David, and then we'll be wrapping it up.
Short comment.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'd just like to make mention of what we're doing in Africa. We have been developing new technologies for community viability for 40 years. We have several world patents, but we've been battling the barriers to innovation, normal resistance, conventional wisdom, and of course, the international cartels. Now, we have succeeded in finding a solution to those problems and to be able to innovate. And we are using all the concepts that everybody has been talking about here. We have raised on our own methods of financing, which is totally outside the conventional system, several $100 million, which we have used for developing Southern Africa. And now we're doing this on a continental scale. We're going to develop the whole of Africa. We're signing 15-year development mandates with each country in Africa. We've signed a contract recently with the Comoros. We're raising $6 billion to develop the Comoros on our own methods. And we are creating a system for innovation, inasmuch as we are going to be supporting all of the inventive people on the planet. We're going to be supporting this conference because this is the greatest thing I've seen so far. And we want to be very much a part of it. But we are going to be providing all the resources, the facilities, the laboratories, everything that any inventor who has something to contribute to society can come to Africa, and we're going to be providing everything they need, including 55 countries as an in-house market. One of the problems we have with innovative technology, as everyone knows, is trying to introduce it in competition with the vested interests. You cannot actually do it. You cannot do it in the length of time that we have available. But using our own technologies and everyone's technologies on our own projects, with the 15-year mandate for the whole of Africa, no one can stop us. We're not selling anything. No one can complain that we're developing Africa. No one else can develop Africa. We're not slaves. We have the right to develop ourselves. Yes. We're not competing with anyone. We're not trying to fight anyone. We're trying to create one viable area on the planet that can be independently viable when everything else starts to crumble, which it is already, and we have total chaos on the planet.
Beautiful. Thank you. I am impressed with that man and the entire project I've been learning about while we've been here. I think it's incredibly impressive. You've heard of the film Out of Africa with Meryl Streep? Well, I think this is Get Back to Africa with Cecil. David, you wanted to make a final comment here?
I'd just like to respond to this gentleman, actually to both of you. I get a lot of calls in my work from inventors. Inventors and philosophers and writers and authors actually increasing at an amazing rate, particularly inventors. I also, in my work, because I cross over this bridge, I talk to mayors, sheriffs, senators, governors, and noticing in America that there is a transition now. In America, particularly in California, we've seen 9 municipalities bankrupted. San Bernardino, among many others in California, and in the Northeast. And they are looking for tangible redirects in the utilities and many functions in their city makeups. And we talk about, and wrong or right on my part, I'm offering this out because I believe that when we're talking about inventions, devices, thoughts and ideas, that we're talking about all of us together. You all come from the rural areas and the cities and the towns from all over the world, and you're all looking for tangible changes next year. And when we talk about venture capitalists, and again, it's only my thoughts, I think we're going down a road that is potentially an old paradigm itself. I know venture capitalists, and the issue with venture capitalists is you do get the control. And you, of course, with inventors are artists, and you have the ego, and now we're talking about copyright and patents and intellectual property. And I would just offer out that from the people that I'm talking to in my neck of the woods, New Mexico, California, Arizona, that those municipalities are actually asking for inventors to come into the communities and to create the energies according to what they need, according to the makeup and the demographics of that community. That doesn't require venture capitalists. It doesn't even require raising money. And it seems to me that then gets everybody's buy-in. You then have an inventor on your doorstep. They're living in your community, growing up in your community, building your community. And something that I would certainly encourage others to think about. In places like Africa, I think that's vital. Fritjof Bergman, who I've worked with in the past, he's doing very much the same as you are, sir. And if you can place inventors into a municipality in a town, and you can offer them a home, and you can say, this is your home now, invent for us, light this place up. That may just be a different idea to going down this old paradigm of, I need to raise money, I need to get $1 from each person. Because as soon as you go down that road from a human behavior point of view, I see that that's where you're taking the free energy and you're taking the thoughts of the inventor back into an old paradigm rather than going towards the energy that is divine and is provided free in many ways. So I just wanted to...
That's a beautiful comment. Thank you. I appreciate that. It dovetails with what Cecil's saying. We are breaking through a new paradigm. Jeane, your final comment.
Okay, there's one simple but powerful thing that everyone can do, no matter what your resources, as we look at the crumbling of the old paradigm, and rather than focusing on the symptoms of the crumbling and how awful it is, we can each tell the people that we encounter that this hidden history of inventions is only a precursor to what we could have after the dust settles here in building a higher civilization on planet Earth for the human family. And so remember, a vision is more powerful than a rant.
You know, I just a final comment, and then we're going to have a break, and there's going to be a press conference on the second floor that anyone who's involved in press should be there. I interviewed, any of you know who Amory Lovins is? Amory Lovins is like perhaps the foremost environmentalist in the United States. He's got the Aspen Institute. He was working in the Clinton administration for energy security, and interviewed his ex-wife, Hunter Lovins, who wrote a book on climate change, the capitalism of climate change. And she's got clients such as Walmart, as Chevron, as Shell, and these folks at the very top echelons of oil companies are interested in diversification. They know they're not going to be at the top of the mountain anymore, and they are interested in energy efficiency. They're interested in green thinking. They're interested in the transformation. So it's up to us to learn how to work with these people as they come off the mountain and help them down so we have a fair and more cooperative, equitable society. So thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you for tuning in from home. We're going to take, at this point, 20-minute break.